Today we are continuing our discussion on the 16th century Chinese text, the Proverbs on Ladyhood. Previously, we talked about how a girl should handle her closest relationships, especially that of her parents. This is because that the whole purpose of the teaching was to prepare a girl to handle her relationship with her parents-in-law after she's got married. With this in mind, the text doesn't teach everything about a girl, like what kind of clothes she should dress or something like that. It focuses only on the behavior that is specially related to a married life. It, of course, contains details of daily life, but it doesn't say everything. Now, today we are going to finish the first major part of the text, which talks about the premarital life of a girl. The first verse we talk about writes, "Be cautious on fire and candles." It's plain enough to us what it means. It may be strange to us who live in a modernized society full of all kinds of technologies. The ancient people didn't have electricity for lights, uh, as you already know. So candle would be a big thing in people's life. Now, not everyone will be aware of this, but in many parts of the world nowadays, houses are no longer built with wood. In the rural area in China where I worked for 3 years, all village houses are built with concrete. In fact, I was kind of surprised to see that many houses are still built with wood in the US. Nevertheless, for the Asian people, wood is the best and the most and probably only affordable material they can use to build a solid house. They did use mud, but in some parts of the country where it rains a lot, especially during the summer when the typhoon is strong, the mud wall could break down. My dad told me that when he was a kid, every year when it comes to typhoon season, all the neighbors will come to his house at heavily rainy nights to make sure that the mud wall of the house doesn't fall apart. So life was tough. Anyways, the house in ancient China was built with wood, and the roof is constructed with straws. Maybe construction is not a right word. These are easily burned materials, and you definitely don't want any fire touching it. But since candle is particularly important for light at night, taking special care for it is extremely important. In terms of my personal interpretation of the text, there is a special textual adjustment that I need to mention here. In the translation, as well as how many other people will understand the text when they read it, what's connected with candle is another noun, fire. But in fact, I think, in my opinion, that's not what the text means. 16th century in China was towards the end of the Ming Dynasty. According to Chinese political culture, people are required to avoid using any character or word that appeared in the names of the country or the emperor. The purpose of this is to avoid any offense against the dynasty or the emperor, although not so much of the imperial family. An offensive speech in ancient China was regarded as a work of evil forces that will bring misfortune. In other words, verbal offense is a curse. Obviously, if someone really wants to curse the dynasty or the emperor, they can do whatever they want privately, and they could use other means to achieve this. But it is at least forbidden publicly. So if people are not allowed to pronounce the proper name of the emperor or the dynasty, then it was believed that the curse will not fall on them. Up to this day, this strong sense of verbal power in alliance with spiritual forces is still present in many areas of life. In festivals, you want to say good things to your friends and families that will bring them blessings or good lucks. Don't make jokes because they can bring evil power and misfortunes. With this concept in mind, People kind of purposely invite evil or good spiritual forces when they say things. But anyways, the name of the dynasty means light or to lit, like lighting the fire or putting on the light. To avoid using this word in daily life in case of unnecessary offense, the common use of this word is strictly forbidden. It is no way you are allowed to put it in a published work like this. If you see this word in the Ming Dynasty literature, it is most likely a later textual modification. But the substitute for this character is fire. So instead of saying to lit a candle, people would say to fire a candle. That sounds explosive, but in time, the true reason for this change can be forgotten and the way of speech is retained. So here, fire and candle is really about lighting a candle. Of course, there are still other people who still understand this as referring to fire and candle, either meaning just the candle or anything that can possibly cause a fire. That's the interpretational issue. I don't want to go very deep into it, but there are different interpretations. The next sentence is, where is new, though clothes are worn out? It is not so much about wearing a broken old clothes as if it's new. Rather, it's talking about cherishing an old clothes as if it's new. I have mentioned in the last video that the clothing in ancient times are extremely expensive. This is a way that a girl would practice thriftiness. They should be careful not to tear the clothes, nor to bring any damage to it, both in work and in washing it. After many years, those old clothes will still look new. Well, not brand new, but normal. Ancient clothes are very easy to be torn because of its materials and because of the way people made it. There were, of course, good clothes that last long, but people can't always afford it or find it. So this is a teaching that is closely related to what we've talked about last time, about the needleworks of a girl. The unmarried girls are really busy at home. They wake up early and serve the parents. They do houseworks and keep themselves tidy. They light the fire and candles and take good care of their personal stuffs. Now, the text mentions that they also do cooking. The text reads, cook in every cleanness. To cook here is talking about two things, making tea and making meals in the original text. The girls are the ones who will make sure that the whole household is fed, not by money, but by their cooking. They make sure that when the hungry farmers come back from the field, they will eat to their fullness. Maybe not fullness, but not so hungry. The meal is usually just rice, sometimes maybe with seasoned vegetables. Now, if you look on internet, it will tell you that ancient Chinese people eat all kinds of food. That's the archaeological flaws I mentioned in my other video. You can check this out up there. There were plenty of meat, vegetables, and rice, but they were not for consumption of ordinary people. Farmers didn't really have money, so they couldn't buy meat. They couldn't grow pigs to get porks because they couldn't afford feeding the pork. All the vegetables are used to feed human. A great amount portion of rice products were handed over to the government. Eating beef and steak was illegal because cows were agricultural tools considered as public property. Rich people may have all of this, but for ordinary farmers, their meal was really simple and probably tasteless. Just because there are archaeological evidence of mass production in different kinds of cookers and recipes, doesn't mean that it's accessible to everyone. These were reserved for landlords and officials and royalties, not for the commoners. Ancient people didn't really have oil. They rarely eat meat, maybe once a year or in sacrifices. I doubt if they had any seasonings, which were usually monopolized by merchants. but I'm not sure about sources. Fishermen did better because they could fish and cook the fish, while the government didn't really take notice of them. So the tea and meal here is what we can call in Chinese idiom royalty and tasteless rice. Even though it's meals like that, the girl is still supposed to take great care cooking in cleanness. Basically, it's saying, don't leave a mess there, clean up everything. The dirtiness comes from the firewood. As we all know, if we go to camping, the firewood gives out a lot of dusts. You may not notice it in open area, but think about a fire going on for an hour or so in a narrow indoor space. You do have chimneys, but oftentimes when the wind is strong, the air just pressure down into the chimney and forces all the dust and smoke into the kitchen. Or when the firewood is fresh and wet, sometimes it just doesn't burn and all that comes out is smoke. I have experienced both when I try to use these old-fashioned ancient cookers to cook stuffs. After 1 week, the white wall of the kitchen all turned black. You definitely don't want these black stuffs in your food. That's what the requirements are about here. Make sure that the food is clean and make sure that everything will be wiped clean after cooking. Do not talk and laugh aloud. Talking and laughing aloud or making great noises in general is considered rude for girls. It's basically considered a virtue for men. It displays bravery and liveliness for men, but exactly because it's a virtue of man to display such character, it's not the same for girls. The society has different expectations for men and women, and their differences are emphasized. Such a difference reflects in their supposed characters. Men are supposed to be bold and comes forward, while women are supposed to be silent and sits back. Such a character expectation is reflected in multiple levels, and in different levels, the manifestation is not exactly the same. We later will discuss the occasions where wives play a more so-called active or positive roles in marital relationships in many areas. Women's strengths were respected, but their strengths are also navigated to be used in a certain way that respects the natural order of things. The final sentence of this section is, do not listen to the gossips from others. Indeed, ancient females were famous for spreading rumors and gossips. You see this comment in almost all ancient traditions. And it's not just in ancient traditions. When I was in high school, the one place I want to know about someone's affairs is the girls' chatting group. I mean, they knew everything. And that's what they gathered to talk about. It is exactly this type of thing that the author is warning against. Girls should not involve in gossips and hearing and passing affairs about others. Usually those gossips are judgmental, superficial, and one-sided. Gossips can ruin people's reputation. The author is warning the young girls here that they shouldn't listen to people talking about those gossips, even if she herself may not necessarily involved in talking. She should altogether avoid listening to those things in case she acquire the mentality of judging people by rumors and endangers other people's reputation. So this is the first section of the Proverbs on Ladyhood. Next time, we're going to get into the second section of this book, the marriage life of a woman and how she is to behave in her husband's household. See you in the next video.